Adeline Uy, Director Asia of Art Basel. Welcome to Art Basel Hong Kong 2022. We hope you'll enjoy the show.
Hi, welcome everyone. Good afternoon, Asia. Good morning, Europe. My name is Christina Lee. I'm an independent curator based between Amsterdam and Hong Kong.
And I'm Yuk King Tan, an artist and also an arts educator. It's fantastic to be here, and I can't wait to see the Olympics of the art world.
Yeah,
Art Basel Hong Kong 2022.
Yeah, Yuk and I had quite a fun 3 days, kind of going through the fair, and we can't wait to show you our highlights. I think in our tour today, we'll kind of focus a lot on notions of materiality, immateriality, time, and process. And I think we want to start our tour today with a solo presentation of Cali Spooner at Parisian Gallery, GB Agency. Cali Spooner is an artist whose work spans between performance and video, and basically a very mixed media artist. The project that we see here is really very much connected to our time that we spent in the last 2 years trying to grapple with the passage of time, the materiality of time. And in the kind of the kind of centerpiece of this presentation here is a work called Maggie Solo, which forms the larger part of her ongoing project that she started in 2019 called Dead Time, really questioning the notion of the future orientation and productivity obsessed notion of time. And here, what you see is that she created a score for Maggie here, the dancer, to kind of to using the notion of still life to question what is alive and what is dead.
Yeah, and working on from Dead Time, there's another different work that she's had, very small pieces, but I think quite powerful. And what I really like about this piece here, which is called MH12, it's actually cast out of British sterling silver. So it's a intrinsically a valuable object. This is a current currency that's actually a union standard in Britain. And then it's based on a performance that was 12 hours long, where she asked a man, initials MM, to actually hold a bar of soap, or a variety of bar of soap, until they actually melted onto the ground. And they created a sort of interesting smell, and also dribbles of the wax and the soap made the floor slippery. So actually even kind of impeded the audience and how they would react to it. But there's a nice kind of line between the breathing element of the performance of Dead Time and then this utilization of like sight and smell and also the kind of feel of the soap. And moving down to the other work, and it's also kind of in conversation too. Now this is a funny work. It's actually a whole series of fan letters that Cali Spooner has written to a famous actor, Kevin Spacey. It's done in 2017. And that's important because the series of fan letters she says, gets further and further into this sort of psychology of obsession and parasocial relationships. It's of course fantastical, it's not really based on reality, so it has inaccuracies. And she's also based it on a long-term research project she'd had with a psychiatrist called Isabel Valley. And the psychiatrist is talking about psychosis, human vulnerability, maybe the break in understanding about how reality works. And this is actually the cast of the artist's ear. So the relationship to Van Gogh and the idea of mental illness. And I think now that we know about the revelations of Kevin Spacey in terms of sexual allegations of sexual assault, there is this kind of really interesting idea of obsession, and it's very small, very, very tight conceptual works. But I think they really talk to a very interesting idea about celebrity culture, about media, but also about breathing, about hearing, and about the loss of all these sensory.
Yeah, and on top of it, I find her work very interesting, especially with this piece. It's really more like a documentation, like a trace of an action that had happened. And I mean, going back to this project at time, it's actually an ongoing project that will culminate. And what Cali Spooner is doing right now is like kind of creating a repertoire of various instruction pieces that will culminate into an opera and an exhibition that would be hosted by various institutions due to kind of be open in 2024. So it's an ongoing project. So if anyone's interested in it, they can feel free to go to GB Agency's website to find some further information. So let's move on to, in GB Agency, we talk about the body, the alienation of the body, and here we kind of go to Neugerim Schneider's presentation, which really kind of talks about the sociality, like the kind of interaction people have, right? And what you see here, I think, is a great Thomas Byrel piece. And I actually just saw his work in Berlin for the gallery weekend, and it's really great to see another seminal piece here called it's called table tennis, ping pong.
It's called ping pong.
Yes.
And the work is a ping pong from 2020, so it's a recent work. But his interest in this idea of the super form, and this idea of actually taking incredibly small images and building up into larger superstructures or compound images. He started that in the 1960s and 70s. So this is pre-computer. He's one of the first artists to actually utilize fax. I mean, now he works with computerized images, and of course these things are much more common. But when he first started doing it, it was kind of a revelation in terms of German art at that time. And he's one of my favorite artists. I think he's really important in terms of how you think about German conceptual art. And I really like the kind of formation of his language, and so especially in terms of how he's inspired other younger artists.
I mean, on top of it, you see some small details here. Here you see this ping pong ball, and you see the figures here playing. And, you know, like really kind of, I love this kind of analog kind of translation here when you know, looking through these very stock images or these images that he found in this East German magazine called China Inbuilt.
Yes, and jumping in there, so each of the images are of a competition, and it's a national sport, of course, of China. So he's often interested in this Chinese thought and Eastern philosophy, and this is a long-term research project that he's had. So it's amazing that he's done this work, and it's kind of perfect that it's in Hong Kong. And I'll move on to also the beautiful work in Neugerim Schneider. This is like the site-specific work that works so well. It's a wallpaper series by
you can see here
Thomas Saraceno.
The cityscape of Hong Kong. So a very, very much site-responsive work, I would say.
And so both of these artists have done really amazing works in Hong Kong. Thomas Weiler had 3 months in Hong Kong, one of the first artists who did residencies at M+. And Tom Saraceno also did a massive installation. And this work is called Hong Kong Cloud Patterns. Sorry, Hong Kong Cloud Patterns. And he's looking at this, I think of him as like a Renaissance artist. He's trained as an architect. He comes from utilizing scientific research and also working in collaboration with technicians. So these kind of cloud forms and also these foam forms are often just in terms of like this algorithm of these beautiful wallpaper landscapes. But then he's done incredible scale works that talk about our kind of divide between utopia and how we can actually live. But he makes solutions for that, like his beautiful spider works.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, the last piece that we want to talk about here is such a signature piece of Richter of Amnesia called "Tomorrow is the Problem." And this is actually a work that should be activated by having ping pong players playing. So it kind of like really responds very well to the kind of to Thomas Byrel's piece, and as well to kind of the ping pong, you know, diplomacy that was happening in China at that time. And here kind of really like responding to the social moment that could be opened between an encounter of two people.
Yeah. And before we move on, I just want to mention also, as an educator, Thomas Weiler was also the professor of Thomas Saraceno in Frankfurt at Kunstakademie. So there's a nice relationship in terms of very young art that we're going to talk about, and also well-established thought makers. And this work, which is, tomorrow is the question.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it gives us a very open-ended question.
Comment.
Yeah.
Similar to Thomas's.
Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, we just passed by over there. There's the booth of Takeni Nagawa over there.
Yeah.
And which has a great Gutai early work.
So I really wanted to talk about that because we don't have time to really look at it, but Gutai was a movement in Japan, and it was also very similar to Dada in Germany and Western Europe. And the Gutai work was actually by the founder, Shiohira. And Yoshihiro. Sorry. But it's actually done just before he started the movement. So it's one of the earliest works that he has from that period, and it's just a stunning work.
Yeah, Takenina-gawa's gallery has a really great program, really crisscrosses like very historical positions with very contemporary ones as well. So it's always a booth that I find some really great discoveries. Coming up here on my left is Vitamin. Also really great gallery that is based in Guangzhou. It was a very important gallery that kind of fostered a lot of practices of artists in Guangzhou, people such as Chao Fei, Zheng Guogu, and also Hong Kong artists, Bak Sung-chun or Li Kit and Firenze Lai. And here we have a presentation of an 81-year-old Taiwanese female painter called Yuan Zhan. And she had quite a spectacular presentation in Centre Pompidou in 2020. Definitely something to look out for.
And we're moving on towards this very nice promenade. And on our right here, I think that's been a very popular work at the art fair.
As you see everyone taking photos.
It's by the ultimate selfie picture. But it's by a very young artist called Angel Hui. And I've seen it in its other presentation, which was actually flat on the wall. But this is a very beautiful and very interesting new way of utilizing light, way of utilizing sculpture. And the work in itself is actually embroidered goldfish. She says it's based on Goldfish Street, which is a famous and beautiful iconographic street full of goldfishes, also full of the idea of kind of captured life or nature morte. But what I really like about it in terms of like when you see the scale of it in the space and the lighting, there's like an element of like urbanization in terms of the light and the lightscape.
Yes.
But there's also the notion of like the koi pond and the beauty of the kind of reflective quality of the light. So this idea of kind of distilling or capturing a creature versus the beauty of its form, it's a very nice duality.
Yeah, and as I know that she's more known for making ink works on tissue paper. So it's really nice to see how she translates her practice and kind of really connects it to, Hong Kong vernacular culture and everyday life.
Yeah, and it's good to see an emerging Hong Kong artist that won an award for these works and other works, and it's just interesting to see that how they start off with their career. And I think we're going to also talk more about art, the way people progress, and also think about language and sculptural qualities.
Yeah, I think in the gallery system, actually, I think the galleries in Hong Kong and the region have been quite seminal in supporting emerging practices. One gallery that we're actually walking up to, called Kiang Malang, is a gallery that has been doing a lot in supporting local and regional artists. Actually, after 12 years in celebration of 12 years of running the gallery, actually went through into a renaming process. So originally it was called Edward Malang, and now it became Kiang Malang. And they have actually, in the 12 years, have done more than 110 projects, and they're right now in Tin Wan and about to move to a new building in September 2022. So it's very exciting.
And I really like the fact that it's a co-partnership, husband and wife. Edward Malang comes from a gallery which is very storied, dealing with modern art, and then Lorraine has this hyper-interest focus on Southeast Asian art and Hong Kong art and Chinese art. So I'm going to talk to these beautiful works by Samson Young. And what I really like about them is that he's a conceptually based artist. He moves through very sophisticatedly through video and through performance, but these works that are very gestural, that have a lovely sense of color, also a lightness and interesting. So Flight Plan Study, one and this one, and also this one, they actually have their text, their subtitle, coming from the stamp that's here. So here it says, "From above I saw," and the other is quite lovely and quite poetic, which is "Dances out of pollen," and it's based on more serious terms in terms of computer imaging and computer pathfinding of migratory birds. And actually he's been researching the idea of how scientists use these multitudes of swarm patterns to talk about the movement of birds. And what is most interesting in that is that it's an allegory also towards how we can perhaps use the kind of algorithms or control devices to also think about how people move, and also kind of plot changes and plot areas in terms of migratory behavior of people. But in this work, I kind of like the scratching and the kind of the feather work that he utilized. This kind of light use of color, which is different from his other work, which is often based on kind of conceptual ideas about music and about musical notation, coming from a musical background.
Yeah, because most of his drawing works, I feel like it really comes from that tradition of making graphic scores. And in this case, this whole series of researching into birds' flight paths is really also trying to find the glitch between, let's say, algorithmic technology and reality, and how actually you might not be able to predict the flock of birds and their formation. And actually, the title, actually a very small note, is Pablo Neruda's based on his poetry poem called Birds. So this, I look forward to seeing where this is going to develop, because this is a very exciting new project, which it's also, you can see there's some Chinese words here, but it's almost kind of playing with like calligraphy and handwriting. Yeah.
And also the notion of gestural painting. And he's actually got 2 works, I think, right now, or at least one in the film program. So it's really interesting to see as like more, like he was represented in Venice, but the kind of larger works as well as the beautiful drawings. So
I know this really caught your interest.
It really did. I wanted to talk about this work because, as a person who's studied and educated in sculpture, when I found out this was by the lost wax bronze process, I was really intrigued, because this is one of the earliest techniques of making sculpture from even before Christ. It's like 2000 BC, so it's quite incredible. And it's actually a kind of an art form, or a kind of a process that's being lost. So having a very young artist, Nabuki, utilizing this work, and she's talking about very common domestic items, the light, the lampshade, but also she's also investigating archaeological forms. And you can see how incredibly she made the delicacy. And you see, in fact, it looks like what the artist would do is create it out of wax. And then from the wax, they would make these filigrees to be encased in a vat of plaster. And what happens is molten bronze has to be poured into. And so every vent and every shoot will kind of melt the wax down and be left with the bronze sculpture, which has to be cut and kind of sliced off and then polished. So that's why it kind of has this surreal quality of kind of moving out and translating out of material. So she just has a very lovely, very conceptual sense of utilizing material. And a lost wax process is very rare to see.
It's always such a treat walking with you, because from an artist point of view, you can always kind of nerd out on these kind of small processes. And Nabuchi is an artist from Inner Mongolia, currently based in Beijing, and I've been following her work since I saw her sculptures in actually 2016 in the Shanghai Biennale. So it's really great to see her kind of, maturing in her sculptural practice. I'd like to talk about these works here on the corner by New York-based painter Brooke Shui. Here you actually see a huge carpet piece, and she's usually known as a painter, but actually in her early days, actually this was made in 2016 during her time in LA, and she was really interested in painting or mark making on carpet, just to kind of play with the texture. So usually these carpets are purchased as cheap white carpets, and then adding multiple layers of stains. And most people know Brooke's work as, and she's really kind of, a lot of her paintings are pretty much only green. So this red kind of motif, or the use of red, is very emblematic of her time in LA. So this kind of like a red period here, and this kind of also shows a time where she was like exploring this color. And it's always meant to be quite abstract, almost in opposition to her painting practice. And in her painting practice, she often uses skulls and skeletons, kind of half humor, kind of full of humor, yet macabre at the same time. And here you see, and this work is called Skeletons Embracing, and you literally see 2 skeletons kind of, having an intimate moment. And I guess that's kind of a tension in the pictorial plane and the subject, and the small scale of this work kind of makes it quite remarkable for me.
And I love the things that happen. Actually, we were studying at Kiang Maling's booth, and they had another painting there, so it's actually been sold. So I do love this larger carpet, because it seems to glow with color, and it seems to actually resonate in a sort of a very pseudo landscape formation. So you can always imagine different things pulling in out to consciousness.
Yeah, and then coming here, I wanted to highlight a series of photographs by a Hong Kong artist, Guan Seungji. Guan Seungji, I would say he's someone kind of my same generation. Funnily enough, and he was in the group show, the first show I've ever done. And the subject matter was about real estate. So he actually made a mocking or like kind of a satirical advertisement with a cardboard house, calling it the Ark. And here, this work is called My Nephew. And he likes to play with role-playing a lot and also a little bit of a trickster. This was the story behind this was that he was, instead of calling his trip to Shanghai kind of a work trip to make an exhibition, he actually kind of took the role of a businessman, and then invited his fellow artist, a younger artist, Kwang Zhen-hei, to kind of join him in this role playing of like showing him the ropes of like and making business meetings, looking at plots, like figuring out how to become like a real estate mogul. So in his work, he really plays with the notion of value creation, about economy, and then there's always a little bit of a cynicism there.
Yeah, I do find it very interesting that a lot of Hong Kong artists are utilizing, and younger artists in general, role play about trying to shift your simulated reality into actually the kind of IRL world.
Yeah.
And this artist, Huang Chengqi, and also the other artist here shown is a very early work by kind of our pioneer video artist, Alan Powell. And it's called Drain 2. And it actually is, I think one of the editions is at M+.
Yeah.
So it's good to see very early video work. It's done in Super 8. You can see the box-like kind of idea about the television. Like you can't actually get that now, archival television. And she also has a very nice installation. I think the largest video installation that is currently shown in the world at M+. And M+ was created to really be a lighthouse and sort of a beacon of contemporary art, and literally has one of the biggest screens right now, which covers the whole facade of M+. And Alan Powell was the first commissioned artist to utilize a big work for Art Basel, a beautiful video installation. It's called The Shape of Time. Shape of Light, sorry. And I was at a talk of hers, and she was talking about the idea of the kind of iconography of Hong Kong, and would it be the skyline or maybe Lion Rock? And she's chosen the lighthouse as an idea of a beacon of hope, as also perhaps a protective device around it. She talked about the idea of healing of Hong Kong, but it's really a stunning work, and it talks a lot about silence and quietness, but also this idea of how does Hong Kong situate itself as another mecca for contemporary art.
Yeah, I think that's also very timely, I think, in these particular times in Hong Kong, where healing is a process to be had. And it's also worth noting that actually for those who are in Hong Kong watching this, there's going to be a performance tomorrow at M+ at 5 o'clock that would accompany Ellen Bao's facade presentation. Well, we're actually now walking up to the Discovery section where young galleries feature emerging artists. And here we are at Mind Projects, where we would talk about emerging young female sculptor from Hong Kong, Tap Chan's work. Tap, we have to go here. Tap is right now has a show as a group show in Daegun Contemporary called Breaching, and she's in the show called Breaching Sanctum. And in her work, she really looks at how like using different materials, such as here you see the yellow works here are made out of beeswax, and also the white works around is using thermoplastic. So it's trying to kind of explore different types of material. I mean, one core question is about the sustainability of art making. And second of all, she also uses different techniques, so such as 3D printing and also hand molding. So when you look at those more kind of natural materials, it takes much more time to melt them, to mold them into shape. But perhaps you want to talk about a couple of the sculptures here, because they really are very eye-catching and stunning here.
Yeah, I think she uses sculptural materials in a very sensitive and a very engaged way, and I haven't seen that done so much in Hong Kong in terms of young art. What I really like about she's utilizing here, these modular forms, these breeze box, which are very popular in Hong Kong, even though they're only popular kind of in a brutalist way in terms of overseas. But they're popular in terms of the idea of ventilation. But now that we use aircon, it's kind of ironic that they're still in facades of buildings. And the artist talks about utilizing them in terms of marginal spaces like walkways or like staircases. But in this work, she's shrunken them down and then poured beeswax to make the molds out of very warm, organic, malleable substance. And I really like this work complex as it relates to this other work, The Castle, which she's talked about 6 months of work. You can actually see her handprint and her thumbprint. It's built up with like layers and layers, the kind of incredible difficulty of like making a shape. And she was talking a lot about termites and also the bees and how they make hives and how they make kind of these compound works. And it's very interesting to see this kind of building block sculpture that has a very warm color. It's an incredible way of like moving and looking at negative space. But at the same time, you can actually see her fingerprints. And she made this joke that, you know, if she ever did a crime, something would happen. And
her fingerprints are all
her
over.
Her DNA is actually imbued in the work. But yeah, I find it a striking work. But one of my favorites is this work here, and it's called Duplicity.
Guess which one is the real one and which one is the fake tree?
So she chose the fake tree first. And
Which is this one here.
And then the other tree is real. So I know there's a lot of popular interest in this work. So it is actually a growing plant. And the thermoplastic, I think it's a really interesting substance because it
Because I've never heard about it until she talked about it the other time.
It's now a recurring motif in her work. So it's a kind of a substance which is plastic and perfectly emulates plastic at the same time because it's biodegradable and it can also be melted down and reshaped. So it's both hard and soft, and also the idea that it's like forever at the same time it can be used again. I think she really likes the idea that it's kind of changing structures. And
yeah, and there's an organic, you know, kind of the tension between natural, organic, and permanence and impermanence at the same time. I think also one important thing is I feel like a lot of Hong Kong artists are very much shaped by their living environment. And like in Tap's work, you really see how the kind of living visual culture that surrounds her really informs her perception of space. Here, this kind of strange structure that's kind of protecting the plant or restricting the plant. Kind of also, if you live in Hong Kong for a while, you do see this kind of idiosyncratic use of structures in public space where it's kind of like a little bit, overbearing, I would say, or kind of over-controlling. So yeah.
Even in the planters, they're cone-shaped, very much like the architecture, urban planning that actually makes spaces so that sleepers can't be there or the homeless might be moved out. So everything is considered in her work. And I think it's a very nice interplay between the barrier that's here on the wall-based work and also the barrier that's in front of these beautiful artificial and natural trees. And what I want thinking about is that she tells a story which tells this kind of like issue, which is a serious issue, but I think it's kind of fascinating where she has this issue of sleeplessness, this idea of insomnia, and how that influences and it's in some way, even her work seems to have this quite dreamlike, surreal quality. And I think a lot of it in terms of work, in terms of this kind of waking dream life, or this kind of possibilities of seeing something in a different way.
Yeah. I mean, also here, this other work is kind of like a barrier. I mean, when we came and did some research, I was asking her, like, how do you decide the scale of your work? Like, how do you relate to it? And basically, she said it's very important that it has to be in relation to her body. So this cannot be too big. The gap here, it's quite interesting because you can actually just somehow hide behind here, like it's a curtain, you're like a protection from the outside element. So I really like this. You know, are you being protected? Are you being constrained? And this tension is something that I feel that her works really grapples with in a very interesting manner.
It's very much work that you want to touch, that you want to be around. And here there's two different structures of soap. Again, we can see soap as a kind of thing between other artists like Cali Spooner and Tran. And one is imbued with Himalayan salt, and the other is charcoal. So that's why you see these very beautiful differences. You know, all natural from the beeswax to the charcoal to the Himalayan salt, and this kind of light pink, very flesh-like tones.
Yeah, and then this work is called Sanitized Insanity.
Yes.
So it's talking about purification. So there's a kind of an underlining thought about, you know, the mental states. I mean, I guess going back to this insomnia and anxiety there, that her work, it's kind of like the undercurrent of her sculptural practice. Over
so
there, oh my God, there's so many people, whoa.
Navigating the streets of Basel.
Yeah.
This is a very nice installation by a Malaysian, Chinese artist that did a residency in Malaysia. And she's recreated her experiences and her kind of psychological state of being in a rainforest. She she's a photographer, a younger artist, and I think I like the way she uses chiaroscuro and also collage and cutout shapes to actually bring quite emotional kind of areas of threatened, but also kind of welcomed. And there's a nice relationship to Tap's work and to this Taiwanese art that you can sort of see this ability to draw you in, but at the same time talk about the kind of artificiality of urban life versus the kind of quite intimidating elements of like natural phenomena as rainforests.
Yeah, and there is something to be said, I mean, about the scale of these cutouts really, and the kind of tactility that it's imbued in this work. And I think, yeah, as you said, I mean, not only Tap's work, but I think a lot of the artists in this year's show actually talk about nature and habitats and art, a lived environment. One great example is we're going to a next gallery here, Bangkok City Gallery, that's based in Bangkok, with a presentation by Dusiti Huntrakun. This work, Dusiti is a sculptor, and in this work he was really looking into what is in our lived environment, what is a site. In this case, he was really looking into pictures. Here is represented pictures of geckos, and then also inspired by fungi. And here's like you have these kind of sculptures that are inspired by kind of the sprouting of fungi and creating kind of mythologies around these figures that are also living organisms around us, but not in what we think as a natural kind of world. The funny thing is, actually, I was chatting very briefly with the gallery, and they said that actually the Hong Kong audience were particularly interested in the air conditioning because it's such a common kind of sights that people do see, and they were quite interested in the everydayness of this presentation, which is what Dusiti is trying to capture.
And I think you have to give it to the Art Basel organizers. People think it's only by chance that you have connections between artists like Tap, like Fan Ji, and also like this artist, where they actually start to kind of have really interesting conversations and very interesting moving points towards them. In some way, I think you can think about in terms of institutions like museums would do that, but at Art Basel you can also have quite nice conceptual and kind of curatorial practices.
Yeah.
And that's part of Discoveries.
And just on my right-hand side, we have another gallery from Bangkok. There's a very strong Thai representation this year in Discoveries, where you have the work of Sarut Sutavets. It's very hard to pronounce. He's a video artist, and in this project, he looks into the kind of constructed history of River Kwai, which people do know. Through popular culture, which actually is a name that was inserted or kind of like stuck with a place that wasn't actually supposed to be called that. So he's a very young artist that I had the pleasure of meeting with him in Bangkok earlier this year. So yeah, it's really great to see, you know, that the Art Basel Hong is so much on the pulse to kind of showcase emerging practices.
Yeah. And it's often very difficult, like we would know, to show video, to show other works that have some sort of difficulties because there are perhaps more newer techniques, like the found object work or also the installation-based things. So I think Art Basel is really, and Art Basel Hong Kong is really being on the forefront to show very young Southeast Asian and Asian art.
Oh, I see now we pass Capsule Gallery, which is a great gallery in Shanghai, and I think there's a series of drawings that really caught your eye, Yuk.
Yeah, I really love this work of Young Gao. And she's a young animation artist. And these are actually stills that are quite beautiful based on her new animation film. She's very popular also on the film circuit and the moving image circuit, so she has the element of being a filmmaker. But these stills, and they're quite surreal, and they have an element of kind of brooding, the urban landscapes, things at night, things of action is just about to happen. But she's just an incredible technician, and it's lovely to see them.
Oh, but yeah, I feel like there's there's a trend or a thread here, like this kind of like melancholic, self-reflection or projection into our lived environment that we've seen. At least for me, I've seen in this show. Would you agree that that's like because I didn't come here last year? Did you feel like the subject matters were different?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not only the pandemic or it's not only the kind of cultural situation, but I think art is becoming quite reflective and utilizing common techniques of mass media, like the storyboard, or also utilizing kind of materials that can be done biodegradable, because the interest of actually making a sustainable future is really part of it. But it's part of this kind of investigation into time and memory and rethinking our own practices. And so you have this kind of introspection, but also the ability of artists to take time and to actually make these delicate works.
Well, it almost feels like it's a perfect segue to Movana Chan's work. She's represented by Flowers Gallery. I mean, I knew her since I started out as a curator, funnily enough, since 2005. I'm probably showing my age now. And she's already at that time, she's been really busy working using paper, and then using so you can say that her practice is quite sustainable, I would say, because she uses paper and kind of goes through a treatment and uses paper to weave these very intricate fabrics here. And then it's really great to see it in such a monumental scale. And I think even though the fair has got smaller in size, and there was still the opportunity to showcase big works like this, which in a space like Hong Kong is actually quite a treat, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, it's always incredible to see large-scale installation. You can see how Movana has used the kind of perspective of like looking up and finding something that's so delicate in knitting, at the same time so monumental. But then she also plays with the idea of like lights and the fairy lights of it, also more serious issues about mass consumption, because all of these are things that materials collected over the pandemic.
Yes.
So there's a very nice sort of sense of utilizing everyday materials to try and transform your social circumstance and overcome those constraints.
And I mean, it was also very time consuming. I think she has to go through quite a complicated process to turn the paper from its raw material into something that could be quite sturdy, because the sturdiness of that material is also quite important to the work.
Yes.
We just saw an artist now we wanted to highlight, Mac 2, waving to the audiences hiding. We're actually on our way over to the SART, which we will talk about her practice.
Yeah, and the SART has been a great gallery to have in Hong Kong. They have a great focus on, they call it boundary pushing art from Asia, and they really lived up to that. And I really think that Mac 2, the artists that they work with, like Mark Chung, have done large-scale installations and large-scale kind of interventions that pull out what we and start to kind of flip it up. And I think of Mac 2 as a ringleader, kind of an agent provocateur in terms of her work and also her performances and her stand-up comedy routines.
Actually, I first saw her work when she just graduated, where she was at that time already quite interested in a very performative practice. She did a work where she was hand tweezing all of the seeds out of the skin of a strawberry. So she's always playing with this, she's quite idiosyncratic in her practice, and she really talks about the idea of the construction of belief, the notion of class, success, also very deeply rooted with superstition, also with technology. She's very much in tune with what's happening in technology. And what you see here is actually part of a larger series of paintings that she's made, I think since 2019, where she works with Taobao painters to paint scenes from Sims. So she's been playing Sims, I think, around that time, and then she's also in Sims. You kind of create your fantasy life. So in this work is a later work out of that series called Gang 5. So in here she imagines a gang of nuns, like really cool, hanging out. And what she does with this is that she kind of cuts an image into 3 parts and sends it to different Taobao painters. And so now you just saw a painting, and now we're gonna look at the sketches, which are also quite exquisite on their own.
Yeah, and I wanted to focus on these because I think they really work well. They're meant to be in some way collaborations and accompaniments to the paintings. But these drawings out of pencil and also their very light gouache are very well rendered, even though they're artists that are hired off Dalbo. She talks a lot about the seams, so they're broken up in sets of 3, sometimes vertical tetrets, sometimes horizontal. And these part of a Home Sweet Home series. I'm very interested in this pandemic life.
And for her, it's like, I feel like Sims seems to be a projection of her desires, and you can see this is her avatar, like living her best life on a rooftop. So, and then her here's a pandemic kind of romance scene with her lover in this simulated world. So she's really playing a lot with the reality and fiction, and yeah, I think.
What I really like also in this mirror stage and the other work's A Gang of Four, in the pandemic series, that she's often thinking about how she can escape the kind of constraints of Hong Kong. So this is actually an imaginary city she calls Shiva, which I think I'm saying incorrectly, but it relates in some way. It looks a lot like Hong Kong. It operates a lot like another mega city in China, and she's making these interplays and these kind of I call it chaos agent kind of conversations where there's girl, boy, boy. There's also these nuns that are situating themselves in different areas. And The Sims is interesting because it's a gameplay that's often about mundanity and everyday, but at the same time she's talking about the fantasy and the ultimate other life. So as we move through, it's great to see that she has other series, larger works. And I know that the drawings are incredibly popular, but that they are already sold out and there's a waiting list.
Yeah.
But very, yeah.
For those who want to register their interest.
Very young art, and it's great to see what they can be doing in Dessau, and a well-established gallery of new work that's actually quite challenging.
Yeah, I think let's head on to another gallery because I think time is running out.
Oh no, we can do this for hours.
Well,
I do love this Bingyi work. And just to briefly talk about it, it's actually literally created as ink bombs. So the video shows that she drops canisters of ink art and ink paint and creates these cathartic explosions. And also there's this beautiful sense of the chants and the way the wind patterns form, but the actual explosiveness of it was shocking to see. So important calligraphy artist, but utilizing incredibly different techniques and in some ways relating to artists like Xiao Zhou or Roman insignia, and it's good to see her installations at large scale in Art Basel.
And we're now here in our next stop, Silverlands, a great gallery that's in Manila, started in 2004 and works closely with artists in Southeast Asia that really shares this strong spirit of collaboration and really working in a very transnational way, I would say. And the presentation that you see here is very much connected to that ethos and kind of attitude. It's the title of this presentation is called All States, No States, which already kind of like hints towards this transnational border breaking programming of theirs. You were really drawn to Yilan's work, and you actually, you got to see her presentation in chat earlier last year.
I really wanted to focus on this because it's actually hard to see, and it's very sad that people may not be able to see it and not be able to come to Hong Kong or also in the Philippines. She does show internationally, but she is a fantastic mid-career artist. She did this incredible mid-career survey at Chat in the Mills, and this is actually called Dukat Kat. And Kat relates to steps from the meaning of them. She's from Sabah, so in the kind of indigenous language in part of the islands. But the steps also are related to the actual weave patterns. And you can sort of see, and it starts to kind of create platforms of difference and platforms of different stages, much like conceptual cubist painting, but this way done under the labor of women. And she uses her collaborators in a great way, where she highlights their names, also their histories, and Tukat Kat, I'm saying that correctly. Tukat Kat also relates to the taste that you can have inside your mouth. Mm-hmm. So she's often dealing with the idea of privacy and the public. And in her survey, she did this really beautiful work, which is a video where she got all the women of the village, it was a fishing village, to knit a long scarf. And then the women had to unroll it and go from one side of the village to the other, except it's a fishing village and it's underwater. So they actually had to almost submerge and hold up the kind of pathway or the boundary between two different forms. And so her weaving work and also her sculptural installations also works well with this younger artist.
Yeah, Diego Diaz's work is here, as you see. I mean, these are a series of, this is the title of the entire presentation is inspired by her work, and really talking about the notion and the use of flags in this time in politics. And I guess in a way, I mean, her work is really very much, her iconography is inspired by post-American kind of cartoons, imagery, and the work is actually, I first saw it a documentation. I was also in Centre Pompidou in this project called Princesses, City of Princesses, and also kind of like points to a kind of practice that's very rooted in a very underground culture and very kind of zine culture, which is always great. And it's a very strong work that kind of has a very unique Filipino flavor, which is obviously a culture that was very much influenced by, the Americans after the war. I think we kind of covered a lot.
We did.
We were a bit greedy also. We wanted to show everyone tons of stuff.
That were a little bit off schedule, off piste, but it was good. We really wanted to cover because there's so much exciting work, and it's fantastic to be at Art Basel 2022. It was a very sad moment when the 2020 was cancelled, and then it was great to see it back in 2021. I think living here in Hong Kong, some of the gallerists have said that last year, even though it was of course smaller and was a pandemic art fair, there was more interest in kind of building up Hong Kong collectors, and there was actually a lot of really exciting sales, and I think we're seeing the kind of success of that and the realization of the different directions that art fairs can go, even in difficult or new circumstances.
Yeah, I wanted to end our tour here actually in High Art with a presentation by American artist Wang Shui. Here you see, and these are a series of paintings, oil on aluminum honeycomb panels that you would also, it's also a similar set of paintings are on view in the Whitney Biennial right now. Wang Shui is an artist that really looks into the kind of intersections between art and technology, and these paintings are what they will call a collaboration between AI and the artist. So the images and previous paintings were fed to the AI through deep learning and then kind of generating new images where Wang Shui would then mirror and add towards. So really questioning the notion of authorship here, and even to a point that Wang Shui would say that these are kind of like cave paintings of our time. So I really wanted to, there's different artists in our tour that uses technologies in different ways, and I thought this was probably a great way to end our tour, that really looking into the possibilities of using technology and artificial intelligence in art production.
I think art production has also expanded in such a great degree. You've got other artists that are like hiring out or talking about the idea of like exploding value in artificial circumstances. And then you have like young Hong Kong artists role-playing and creating a fantastical world. So it's been great to see.
Yeah.
And thank you, Christina, for being my co-partner in this. Now we can have a fantastic glass of champagne. And thank you, Art Basel.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. And don't forget to look at the OVRs if you can't come here, and hopefully you'll have a great discovery. Thank you.
Bye.